some of the initial high-level results you saw after you started using Anaplan?
Yeah, so we use Anaplan in two primary business cases right now. One is for demand forecasting to pass to supply chain, and then the other is the territory management that Jeff was talking about. For the demand forecasting, the key thing there is, first of all, to realize this is a process that sales reps hate. Right, they have to do it every month.
Yeah,
they have to do it because we're a manufacturer, so we make things and we make them all over the world, got to ship them to different places. So we have to have that demand forecast, but it's the last thing in the world a sales rep likes to do, okay? Much less to have them say, oh, would you do that again because we sent you the old version of the spreadsheet, right? So now to have all that up in the cloud where we change it whenever we need to roll it up from sales rep to district manager to regional, geo, and headquarters, that process goes from days to seconds. On a territory management process, we would take like a month to assemble the data, and then a half a month to put it into spreadsheets and to cut it all up and email your entire customer list all over the world. You don't talk about a security concern. My entire customer list is floating around in email in a bunch of spreadsheets, right? So now you get rid of all that stuff on the front end and you put it into really a really easy user interface. So the front end data gymnastics go away. The middle part where you need to have the sales input is so much easier for them. It's so much more insight. And then the back half to kind of reassemble it and push it back, that all kind of goes from, again, weeks to seconds.
And the security there, because now people only see the data in the system.
That's right.
And you don't have, if I remember right, you would literally cut the spreadsheet into parts.
Yeah.
So there was more security on who was getting what account, and then you'd try to glue it all back together.
And you're like, oh God, nobody insert a column, okay?
Jeff, I wanted to ask you, how did Deloitte Digital start the implementation of Anaplan?
Anaplan is actually, it's fun to implement. It's a lot like Salesforce, where you don't need heavy, hardcore developers to develop Anaplan. We did this in parallel with a lot of the Salesforce work we did during the first implementation. And it takes a good business analyst to define the right rules and the right business processes. It takes an Anaplan modeler and typically a few offshore developers, and you can get a fairly complex model up in a couple of months. You can show progress in a couple of days, a couple of weeks, and just like Salesforce using an agile methodology, you can keep iterating and keep expanding your model and validating your model with the right business representatives to make sure you're going along the right path as you develop it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how has this impacted the sales organization?
Well, from a sales standpoint, it gets them out of things that they just can't stand to do, right? So, and that frees up time for selling, it frees up time for customer engagement, right? And it frees up kind of brain power to really think about it. So the point of getting the forecast is more than just, let's figure out what to make in China or in Mexico. The point of the forecast is, what's going on with your customer? When do they really need the product? When's that deal going to close? You can imagine just the creativity that's unleashed for the sales rep when they don't have to kind of be thinking about all this spreadsheet stuff. Instead, they've got a very intuitive tool to work with. The same thing's true in territory management. I kind of jokingly call it the most wonderful time of the year, right? It's the fourth quarter, right before December, the most wonderful time of the year, and everybody kind of gets the dark humor of that joke. What made it so awful was because you had all these spreadsheets. So you got 1,000 sales reps, you got 1,000 territories, you got 200 district managers, right? You got to roll all that stuff up. Okay. Now you take that whole business process, you put it into the cloud in a much better user interface. Jeff will talk about this in a second. And they can make the changes to model improved territories and see the results of the change in real time.
That's fantastic. And how long did it take for the sales team to actually start using it and breathing it, living it?
Well, I mean, it was right away. I mean, it was like a duck to water. I was kind of actually surprised. I expected more problems than we really had.
Yeah, forecasting went out and was fairly smooth, and we launched it, a month after we launched Salesforce, just to give them time to acclimate to the Salesforce tool, and then forecasting went out. And then territory realignment happens once a year, so we had a few months before we hit the wonderful time of the year.
Yeah, but we spent that on the process design, right? We put in place for the first time a territory scoring model, so we could actually have a way to say how good is the territory. You couldn't do that before in Excel because it was like 17 different pivot tables and don't insert a column and all that kind of stuff, right? And so, I mean, we trained them with videos. We just thought we flew everybody around. And they were using it, I mean, the next week, without any complaint. I remember being kind of surprised at how underwhelming the
we were very prepared to actually have SWAT teams ready to take
Right.
phone calls, and the phone calls were few and far between
Right.
because it was fairly intuitive,
Yeah.
and it just rolled up and went out. And I think we started in Europe and then did North America the following month and didn't miss a beat.
It was really surprisingly easy.
That's incredible. So how did it impact your customers?
Yeah, so the way it impacts customers is a little bit under the covers, right? So from forecasting, it impacts customers because that way they get the product that they ordered on the time that they ordered it, okay? So we want that to be invisible to them, right? We don't want them to kind of think about, oh gosh, thanks for making my product appear on time. I mean, that's just
Yeah,
what should happen,
of course.
right?
Yeah, totally.
And so forecasting affects the customers from that way in that you don't have a customer satisfaction problem. You have the right product at the right time. And you think about us, we're a manufacturer. We've got tens of thousands of SKUs that are sold all over the world, right? We work with thousands and thousands of partners. That supply chain job's a tricky job. And so that's the way that the customer is impacted there. On the territory management side, the customer is impacted, again, in a positive way because it's all about relationships in the end, right? We got all the great SAPs and Salesforces. We got great partners like Deloitte. But in the end, it's about the relationship between the sales rep and the customer. And you don't want to disrupt that thing, certainly not unnecessarily. So to be able to design these territories in the midst of your customers growing and changing, but to do so in a way where you recognize how much customer disruption you're causing, you try to minimize that, only have that happen when it's absolutely necessary, that's a big impact for customers.
Absolutely. So great impact on the sales team and the sales process, great impact on the positive impact on the customer relationships and making sure that doesn't get broken in your supply chain. How about the bottom line for Lexmark?
Yeah, I think the bottom line for Lexmark shows up in things like improved cash cycles because you don't have an inventory problem because you didn't make the wrong thing, right? I think it shows up in sales reps that are going to be more productive because they're not wasting all this kind of mental and, quite frankly, emotional energy on tasks that are harder than they need to be, right? And so that frees up more time selling in the field.